Hi, I'm Denise Griffitts, and this is your partner in Success Radio. Today's conversation is with Mark Aylward, and it's about how C-suite leaders can rebuild leadership and confidence after divorce. And our sponsor today is Mind Shifting with Mitch and leadership coach Mitch Weisberg. High achievers are often great at solving problems for everyone else while struggling with the conversations happening in their own minds. Mind shifting helps leaders recognize the patterns that shape how they communicate, lead, and respond to change. If you're navigating pressure, transition, or personal and professional reinvention, Mitch offers practical tools to help you regain clarity and momentum. And you can learn more and connect with him at mindshiftingwithmitch.org. Now, back to my guest. Today, we're talking about something that many leaders deal with quietly but rarely say out loud: how founders and C-suite executives rebuild after divorce. And Mark is a former founder who built and sold two staffing companies and now coaches high-performing men through major personal and professional transitions. And he brings both lived experience and a practical, grounded approach shaped by entrepreneurship, leadership, and accountability. So, in this conversation, we're going to focus on what it actually takes to steady your leadership, protect your professional role, and start rebuilding clarity. I can't talk today. Rebuilding clarity, confidence, and direction when everything else has shifted. Mark, good morning. Welcome back to your Partner in Success Radio. And I told you this in the green room. I'm looking at my notes, and I don't think an hour is going to be enough, but we'll see how far we can get.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Denise. It's a pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Listen, start with your story. Tell us how your own path and experience shaped the work that you're doing now.
I think it started pretty young. I write a lot of content and I tell a lot of stories because I think that people are engaged by stories rather than just copy, I remember when I was in Little League, so I was probably six, my dad was the coach and he identified me as a leader pretty early, and he was a leader himself, is a leader. And he said to me one day, do you understand that you're the leader of this team? And I said, well, I'm six, Dad, so no.
Not really.
And at that night after practice, he said, I want you to do something tomorrow. I want you to wear one of my white t-shirts as your uniform in practice. And I did. I didn't really ask him why. And then so I went down to the field and I had this big white t-shirt on. It was like a gown because it was so big. And I didn't really know what was going on. And the next day we went to practice, and every single guy on my team was wearing his father's white T-shirt.
Oh,
And I thought to myself, yeah, I'll probably won't understand this until I get older, but I kind of get it. I'm going to be an example. These people are looking up to me in some way, shape, or form. I was a pretty good player, and I was a leader from the very beginning. I was the captain of all my teams. So fast forward, I got into a relationship, and we got pregnant. I was 26, and it woke me up. I was kind of wandering. I had a lot of different skills. I didn't really know what I was going to do, but as soon as I knew I was going to be a dad, my whole life changed. I just kind of stepped up and said, okay, my desires are second now to producing for my family, supporting my family. And I started investigating what I might do. And one day I walked into my parents' condominium, and my mother's best friend was there with her new husband, who was an Australian fellow, a very engaging guy. And I said, look, I was raised not to ask people what they do for a living, but I'm trying to figure my stuff out. May I ask you what you do? Because you sound very entertaining. You sound very upbeat. We said, I recruit petrochemical engineers for Saudi Arabian oil companies. And I said, I don't even know what
oh,
that means.
I don't either.
So, so he said, well, there's a couple of things going on there. Most big companies do go outside to find very critically skilled, specifically trained talent. And when you look at Saudi Arabia, if you're not Saudi Arabian, it's not a very attractive place to live because of the weather and the environment and stuff. So they really need to go and attract people, and they bring them in for 3-year contracts. They buy them a home, they buy them a car, they pay their expenses, and they pay them 3 or 4 times the salary they might get in the United States, because that's the only way the best petrochemical engineers will go to Saudi Arabia for 3 years. And I said, well, how do you get paid? And he said, I get a percentage of the starting salary. And I said, what percentage? He said, it's typically 25 to 30%. And what are the starting salaries? Three or $400,000. And I said, I'm going to be a recruiter because I'm not a math guy, but that was pretty easy math. So I answered an ad in the newspaper. That's how long ago it was. And I went in for an interview on Monday and I got hired on the spot. And they sat me next to a guy that was eventually to become the godfather of my son and one of my better friends and a partner when we started our own business years later. So I worked as a recruiter for a while, and the first guy I placed was an electrical engineer with three young boys, who's single father, and he was about to lose his house to the bank because he'd been out of work for a while. And when I got him a job and congratulated him, he said, "You saved my life." And I thought, I guess this is what God wants me to do. So I put in 5 years, no, 3 years. And then I bumped into a guy because I was looking to get out of Boston where I was. Everybody, God love them all, they all wanted to tell me what I should do with my life and not to do this and not to do that. And I looked at my soon to be wife and said, let's get out of here. I just met this guy and he's starting something down in Florida and he wants me to come. And I just spent a half a day with him and he's given me $1,000 in cash and said, load up your car and I'll see you down there in a week. And so, I jumped. I jumped off, took a risk, but I was pretty comfortable with my skill set 3 years in. And I worked for him for another 2 years. And he came to me one day and said, do you want to start a consulting company with me? Because I had been doing permanent placement up to that point. And I said, tell me what a consulting company is, and then I'll give you an answer. And he explained it to me and said, this is what I'd like to propose. I'll pay you handsomely. I'll give you equity, a small percentage of ownership, and I want you to do all the work. And I will teach you how to do everything, but I'll be the strategy guy and you be the tactician. So I went from recruiter to recruiting manager to sales manager to office manager, and I became his second-hand man. And there's a lot of stories that I could tell inside of that, but I'll try to abbreviate this because it's a long story. And then, he sold that company a couple years later, stroked me a pretty fat check, and I used that check to build a home and start my own company with my buddy. And we hung on to that for almost 12 years. And then I had to sell that under duress, I suppose, because the marriage, we had two more kids, and 10, 12 years later, it wasn't sustainable, and the children were be getting emotionally abused to hurt me. And so I pulled the trigger on filing for divorce. Hardest thing I've ever done. And that took 9.5 years in the court system because all she wanted to do was hurt me. And nothing else really mattered to her. And there's a bunch of stories in there too. And when I eventually got rid of my attorney because I wasn't able to speak on my own behalf, and it was very frustrating. And the court system, as far as in Florida, is still 1950. I'm guilty until proven innocent, and she manipulated the system because she was able to do that. And I became my own attorney at the end, and I actually got sole custody of my three kids and finally had a judge. I think it was the seventh judge over that decade that was a younger woman who wasn't yet jaded about what she was doing for a living, and she was actually concerned about my children for the first time. And there's a bunch of stories in there too. And so I end up with sole custody. My kids are still relatively young, and so I'm doing mom and dad. I had already been doing mom and dad, because she kind of backed out of her responsibility pretty early on. Um, so I figured a bunch of stuff out, but I needed mobility. I needed to be able to go to volleyball games and teachers meetings and doctor's appointments and stuff like that. So I said, I'm not going to do the brick and mortar thing anymore. I'm not going to start another company. I'm just going to consult. I'm going to coach because I've garnered some pretty significant experience about how to move people from a place that they're not content in to a better place. It was in the form of placing them in a new job, but it's the same conversation with guys that are in the midst of divorce. It's like, I'm in this new place right now. I don't know what the hell to do. I'm a little scared. I'm not used to being scared because I've always been successful. And I'm going to do this on my own because guys don't ask for help. And so, I started with the approach of helping men in just career transition, hardship, overcoming adversity, whatever. And then I found that I couldn't message specifically enough to the emotions of those men. It was too broad. So really, just from a marketing standpoint, I said I'm going to niche down even further and just say founders and C-suite executives because that's who I am, men because that's who I am, and divorce because I know way more about what to do in that situation than I ever cared to. And so that's the story. Kids are well, they're all young adults flourishing. Two of them have their own businesses and are doing really well. I was just up visiting my daughters up in Asheville a few weeks ago. So that's not the end of the story, Denise, but it's probably a good place to pause.
Well, and I'm taking down notes like a crazy person. You ought to see it. I had to move a cat off of my pad. It's like, move. I'm writing this down. This is important. But I wanted to ask you, and I know you had some first hard lessons. So when your personal life started shifting and you knew you had to be there for your kids and you had to change how your personal life looked once you got custody, then you had to look at what the first professional consequences you noticed in your performance, your decisions, or your relationships at work with your coaching. Can you share a short example, I guess, of a maybe a leadership misstep and what you learned from it? Because I mean, you got dumped into the water. You really did.
Yeah. I did. I think for me, leadership at the core of leadership is personal accountability. I've
Yeah.
always kind of said to people that there's a lot of fancy definitions going around about leadership, but I think there's only one thing you need to be a great leader, excuse me, and that is you need to genuinely care about the well-being of the people that report to you. Because if you do that, then everything else will follow. Empathy follows, humility follows, good listening skills follow, modeling behavior follows. It's very similar to being a parent. A lot of people say don't treat your employees like family. And I understand that, but I think leadership requires empathy. Otherwise, it's not leadership. It's authority or management. And so um, I just I really tried immediately to say, okay, there is no sense in looking around to see who else's fault this is or what else contributed to this. The only thing that makes sense is for me, in support of my children, to be as strong as I can. So let's step back, and this is what I do with the men that I coach, and do some serious self-reflection, like honestly looking in the mirror. And most guys, myself included, don't do this well on their own. They need advocacy from someone who's going to be candid with them, not just be nice to them. You can't, a guy in this situation, you can't just treat him nicely. You got to slap him around a little bit. You got to wake him up, you know, and I mean that figuratively, obviously. But, I was talking to a guy the other day, just as an example, and I don't mean to move off the leadership thing because I love the topic, but and he was getting emotional, feeling guilty about letting down his kids, that his kids were going to be messed up by the experience. And I said, look, I got to stop you. And I just want to tell you this one thing. I used to think I had to protect my kids from everything, and I did. But what I discovered is they're a lot stronger than you believe them to be. They will understand what the truth is as they get older. They'll figure that out. So the only thing you need to do is take care of yourself and don't badmouth their mother in front of them. And understand that anything you say in front of your children, they're going to share with her. So just pretend she's listening. And once you do that, then it just becomes reps. It becomes get to the gym, do the reps, right? And so I started surrounding myself with good habits, you know. But the first night I got escorted out of my house when I filed, I got escorted out of my house with a domestic violence injunction. I went to the liquor store and bought a bottle of scotch and got a hotel room and drank myself to sleep. And then I woke up the next day and said, "Well, that's not sustainable. You got
Yeah, let's not do that again.
let's not do that again." Did I answer your question?
You did. And listen, going back to kids and employees and contractors, there's a fine line between with kids in particular, I think. They don't want you to be their friend.
No.
They want guidance. They want, if they did something wrong, they need to know about it and fix it if they want to or don't. But I mean, there is a fine line there. But the thing is, with kids and with employees, I don't think they're really listening to what you have to say, but they're sure watching the heck out of you.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're no question about it. And that's probably was one of the hardest things because you no matter how strong you are, this depletes you. It moves you from who you were to something else, at least for a while, years sometimes, and so when you're depleted, your behavior change is noticeable. And I was the momentum guy. I was the guy that got everybody whipped up into a frenzy and motivated, and I was the training guy. And so when my energy was depleted, it began to impact the organization. And then my partners were, because she was interfering with the business, she was contacting customers and employees and showing up, and she was nuts. So they said to me, one of them said, I can't handle this anymore, and the economy was in the dumper as well. And I said, look, we all got together at the beginning and said, if one of us wants to go, there's two options. We can buy you out or we can sell the company and split the proceeds. And that's what we decided to do. And I do regret that. But I wasn't an emotional capacity to do. I had to honor the wishes of my partners, my friends, because I said I would. And so that was kind of tough. But yeah, and the thing with the kids, there were so many opportunities, as you can well imagine, to try and make this easier on them. No, you don't have to go to school today if you don't feel well. I didn't do any of that. I never caved in, and I think it was the best thing that I decided to do because they were in so much pain and anxiety so frequently that it was tempting for me to go, I'm going to make this easier on you. But I didn't make it harder on them, but I didn't protect them from life because I think too many parents do that and they end up with weak young adults that can't face the world. And so, that's a roundabout way of saying, I get what you're saying about the differences between kids and employees, but that you're right. They're watching and
They are.
you better be on your
They
best
are.
behavior. Yeah.
Listen, when I was about 13, my parents had a rough marriage. It wasn't a happy marriage that I ever noticed.
Hmm.
And at one point, my parents were in their bedroom late, late at night, screaming, yelling. I'm pretty sure there was a slap or two.
Hmm.
And my mother came down the hall and she saw me standing outside the bathroom. And I don't cry. I am not a crier.
Hmm.
But I had tears running down my face. And I looked at her and she didn't even know what to say to me. She knew she was busted, that I had
Hmm.
heard it all. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, if you're staying with him for us, stop it.
Yeah.
And she put him out of the house the next day. And I'll be very frank with you, it was the best decision for all of us.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she was
Yeah.
trying to hang on for the kids. It's
Yeah.
not
I
always
get
the
it.
best thing.
I get it. Yeah. I decided, I was raised Catholic. I'm a practicing Catholic. So marriage is a big deal and divorce is a big deal. And I wrestled with that for a while. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I have no control over this. And she's causing harm to my children.
Right.
And so it was I say it was a hard decision, but it kind of wasn't either. I mean, when I made the decision, I'm like, God's going to understand. I mean, he's seen the whole thing. He's going to understand. So I get it. And it makes me think of my grandmother. Apparently my one grandfather, my mom's grandparents, he was not a nice guy and she was a lovely lady. And apparently I didn't see this, but I've heard the stories that when my mother was young, he slapped her around one day and she went back to her mom and said, I'm being abused. And her mother told her, I don't care. You go back. He's your husband. You go back. Because that's what they did back then,
I
you know?
know.
And it's terrible, it's terrible. But
It really is. And I think we don't have, well, maybe some people do, but I think that mindset, I hope, is pretty eradicated. I don't think God or anybody else, aliens, whoever's watching, listening to us, wherever we came from, I don't think they want us to be wretched
no,
at
no,
all.
no. It's an interesting conversation. Is man basically evil or is man basically good? And I've heard both sides of the conversation. My dad has a saying that if you're not being taken advantage of every once in a while, then you're not being nice enough to people. And
I like your dad.
yeah, he's got a few. A few more will come out. So he's 97 and still drives his own car to church every day and doesn't take any prescription medication. So I got to talk about a good model to have, you know.
No kidding. Well, Mark, when you started, you realized you had to stop and everything was going on that you just had, as you said, no control in. And that's honestly, I've been there. We've all been there at different
Mhm.
times and multiple times in our lives,
Yep.
really. We lose creativity, we lose common sense,
Yep.
we lose money. We just lose because we're so busy beating ourselves up.
Hmm.
So, what was the first move that actually helped you stop sliding and begin to rebuild practically and emotionally?
Yeah, again, it falls right into the line with what I do in my coaching. It was the next day, hungover, and you know, when you get this, I got literally walked out of my house by the police, and they had a 5-page domestic violence injunction. There wasn't one line of truth in it, and it was clearly in reaction to being served papers, and she ended up doing that 3 times. What happens when you're escorted out on a domestic violence injunction, and it should, particularly for men, because you got to protect the women. There are bad guys out there. I can't see my kids until the after the trial, which is now 6 weeks away. And if I contact them, I'm violating the order. So she's telling them for 6 weeks that I just left, that I just don't care, and I can't call them, and I can't certainly go over to the house. And so I don't know if that. So that was a basically the next day I wake up and I'm like, well, I didn't see that coming. And then over and over, the behavior and the actions that she took were criminal. But I'm not a criminal, and I couldn't get myself to think like one. So I thought, I'm going inside and I'm going to make some choices. I'm going to go find myself a bright, lots of windows, lots of light, lots of flowers, lots of music, Catholic church, and I'm going to start going again. And then I'm going to go find a yoga studio. And my daughters had been trying to get me to try yoga for a long time, and I finally ended up at the local YMCA. And I went for 3 years, 5 times a week, and I just ratcheted up my exercise and my prayer. And then things started to get clearer. The problem was it wasn't an instance. It became an ongoing battle. So every time I would get to breathe, I'd get something else in the mail or somebody else would knock on the door. I got to know all the local police because I got pulled over and talked to and intervened with for a while and served quite a few times. But that I think I credit the going inside. This is all me. No one else is coming. I got to be the strongest I can be. And I did as as well as I could, not to badmouth her in front of them, even though they would come to me every once in a while and say, "Dad, Mom's crazy," and I'm like, "I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm just
Yeah.
sorry you feel that way because that doesn't help anybody." So that's all of the stuff I do with guys. It's simple, but it's also hard, and getting momentum, taking the first step is probably where I add the most value. It's like, come on, get up, rub the dirt off, let's get moving. You're not the same guy. You'll never be the same guy. Let's find out who you are now. Let's
And
go
let's
down. Let's
find
go
out,
deep.
right. And let's find out what's, holding you back, where you can move forward. And I have to tell you, I wrote this down several times while you were talking, and I wrote down the word grief
Mm-hmm.
because so much of what you're sharing here, there's immense grief there. And grief brain is not helpful. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not.
No, no,
And you make decisions you should have never made. You look back and go, what the heck was I thinking?
oh,
Well, you
that,
weren't. You were
no,
not thinking.
no, spot on. I mean, making, a large part of my practice for my entire life is this idea that, making decisions in an emotional frame of mind is not good.
No, it's
And that
not.
and that's why I use something I call the pause that my dad taught me from his fighter pilot days when I was a kid. He'd say, teaching lessons, he'd say, what's the first thing you do when an engine catches on fire? And I'm like, I don't know, Dad. He said, nothing, absolutely nothing, because all of the training that you've had, Your mind and your body knows exactly what to do, but it won't do those things when you're scared. So you have to eliminate the emotion. Sometimes it only takes a second or two or 5 seconds. It's just a conscious effort to say, I know what to do. This is not a fearful thing that's happening. This is just one of the things in the training manual and the years of training that I've had. And that's such a difficult thing to do in a really heightened and fearful place like I was, but you have to figure out how to do that. And if you can develop that tool, that skill at an early age, life's going to be a lot easier, you know?
It is, and I use the pause a lot. And frankly, I didn't know that I was doing it. Apparently, I figured it out pretty young, but I pause frequently because I know that I'm a smartass. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just no other way to describe
Well,
me.
me too.
I know this is why we're chatting. We're having a good time here. But the thing is, look, my mom would say if she's thinking it, she's going to say it. Don't ask her anything. And she meant it. You know, especially if I was in a group of people I really didn't like.
Yeah.
Don't talk to
Yeah.
her. But I had to learn to pause so I wouldn't say something mean or cruel or just frankly idiotic.
Yeah.
But I had a business coach years ago, and I talk about this quite a bit because she basically put into words what I was doing, but not really understanding what it was. And I was whining. I was not a good, I wasn't a good coachee. I
Yeah.
was just doing a lot of whining. And finally, the day I was convinced that she was going to say, Denise, I don't want to work with you anymore.
Mm.
She was very quiet. And I thought, this is it. She's going to tell me to go away. And she said, Denise. And I said, yes, ma'am. Because I was scared at that point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
said, what are you tolerating? So that's my pause every single day. What are you tolerating?
Mm.
And you'd be surprised what pops up. Stuff you're like, no, I don't. Oh, yeah, I do.
Yeah. Yeah. This is
Ask
a
yourself, what am I tolerating? And then sit and shut up about it. Figure it out.
Yeah, the value of silence is incredible. It's just incredible. And we live in such a noisy world that's another example of one of the tools that I train guys on, which is like, well, I knew that. Well, everyone knows almost everything that I teach.
Yeah, but
That's
are
not
you doing it? That's the
right. That's not
question.
the point. They're not executing on it. And I think that another phrase become a big fan of is because it's what I do. We need to be reminded far more than we need to be taught new things, right? And I think that's the whole game, you know, and that self-reflection exercise. Guys in particular, but people in general, human beings, are not good at looking at themselves in the mirror and being honest about what's going well and what's not going well. But in that conversation, that's just the beginning of that conversation. Why isn't it going well? Why is it important to me? What are my values? Are my actions and words aligned with my values? Well, I don't even know what my values are anymore. So you really just got to go back to the Stone Age, step number one, and then just chip away. And then you start to see people wake up. You start to see people have epiphanies. Their eyes get brighter. Their skin gets clearer. It's just an amazing metamorphosis, but it's a lot of work, and most people aren't willing to do the work.
It's scary when I realized that I had to do that work instead of just reacting all the time because that's what we do. We just react. Oh, you have to do this. Oh, yeah. No, I don't have. Now, and I kind of liken it to those old black and white, those film noirs where, they've got this guy in a fedora and he's shining a bright light on somebody's face and said, tell me what's going on. You have to do that to yourself.
You do.
And you have to be brutal with yourself and you have to make yourself cry a little bit.
Oh,
And
I
then
did. I'm not a crier either, but I did
I'm
my
not,
share.
but yeah, I mean, I'm like internally I'm breaking up, I'm breaking my heart. But and then you write it down so you can go back and say, did I solve this? Is this still an issue? And I'm not saying full on journaling. I don't have the patience for that.
Yeah.
But I do write these epiphanies down and revisit them and go, oh, this one's okay. I've got that one brushed out of the way. It's
Yeah.
no longer part of who I am, but that one's starting to tick me off.
Yeah. 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 I do. Part of what I do is journaling, and I resisted it for 50 some odd years, and I finally found the need to just get stuff out. of my head. And I don't tell people what to do. I tell them what worked for me. And I
Right.
tell like for exercise, I say, look, I walk. I used to play full court basketball, but I'm 64 years old, and it doesn't make any sense for me to risk the injury that's much more likely at my age. And I shouldn't be running up and down the court with 25-year-old guys. It's just, be honest with yourself. So I started walking. Now, if I have some pain in my legs or whatever, then I probably would get a bike or I'd go swimming. There's all kinds of options that are free for guys. Nothing that I do, really, almost nothing costs money. It just costs time, you know? And my morning routine is really solid and it saved my life. You know?
I'm with you. I like to walk, and I have a couple of them vibration plates. I love those things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes I can't get out. I'm in the deep south. We're in the middle of what we call the mud season. Next month is hurricane season. But
Yeah.
before that, we have the mud season. Going outside right now is I'm going to sink in the backyard.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
muddy.
Yeah.
But, I'll get on that vibration plate for 15 minutes and I just kind of my meditation. I just zone out. And then I come back and I'm creative and it works for me. But
Oh,
you're right.
yeah.
You have to find what works for you, but you have to do it. You have to have that. I don't know if it's a system or just that I don't know, you have to do it. And you just said something, I don't have time. Well, when your time can run out at any moment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
Don't hang
what's
on that. We don't know.
no, I think that I can't remember the last time I heard it, but something to the effect of what's the point of living longer if you're not living well, you know? And so, yeah, I think that the whole thing's personal accountability. And I'm totally humble about all this stuff as well. I mean, I'm not telling anybody that I'm the savior or I got it all figured out or you need to work with me. If guys aren't ready to work with me, I don't want to work with them because it doesn't work, you know? But yeah, and I just look around at my friends and colleagues that are my age and men, we all at some point in our life, we all get to a point where the next step is a choice. And to me, the simplicity of it is I can be bitter for the rest of my life or I can get better for the rest of my life. And I've never looked at that choice and thought I want to consider that bitter option. It never crossed my mind. But these people, they are angry all the time. They're sad all the time. They're overweight. They watch a lot of TV. They sit around. They eat lousy food. I mean, it just escalates. Once you pull that sweater thread, the whole sweater unravels quick, So I think that's the first step for anybody, regardless of what the challenge is.
It is. And what you said about bitter, I was sitting with my grandmother. She was a very wise woman. She was a farmer's wife, and people often would mistake her for being a little bit simple. She was anything but.
Right.
She just wasn't all that chatty. But when she said something, I paid attention, and we were sitting on a bench in a park I'd never been to, and she was looking at this one lady and I never heard her say an unkind word ever. But
Mm.
she was looking at this one lady who I hadn't really noticed, and she said, "Oh, poor thing." And I said, "What? Is she bleeding? What's going on?" I was pretty
Yeah.
young. And she said, "She's just so unhappy. Look at her face." And I did. And the woman's mouth was drawn down. It was tight. The misery was in her face for the world to
Hmm.
see. And she said, "Denise, if you pay attention, you're going to see when people are in repose, women in particular, who they are."
Yeah, no, that's a spot on observation. That what
Wasn't it though?
very, very wise. It makes me think of, when I started to think about this divorce focus, I thought there's some downside to that. You're going to relive some things that you don't necessarily want to relive, but you're going to have to because that's where the authenticity is in your experience as opposed to just your knowledge, right? Because I'm not even a big knowledge guy. I'm more of a wisdom guy. I think there's such a huge difference, but I would go into that courtroom very often, like over a 10-year period, on average once a month, like a lot. Like I remember getting angry at having to pay the parking every time I went in there. It's just like, what? But
They
I would
should have
look
brought you
around.
coffee. I mean, didn't
Yeah.
anybody offer you coffee or pizza
Well,
or
here's
something?
it's a lonely, lonely place, the domestic court system. It's a very lonely place. And I would look around and I've got wherewithal, I've got capabilities. I'm a confident guy, I'm a strong guy, blah, 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 blah. But every guy in there was sad or
I bet.
confused.
Right.
or angry. And I would quite often identify someone by the look on their face, and I would walk up and I would just say, "Can I help you with anything? I mean, I'm between meetings right now, and you just look like you could use a pat on the shoulder or something." And I help guys find places. I know where every room in this courthouse is. So if you need you need child support, custody, well, filing papers, whatever it was. And I still think to myself, there's guys roaming around the world right now, the earth right now, that are just like that are contemplating divorce, then they're in the middle of it, or they just sign the papers and they think it's over, and what's really going on is no, it's just begun, because you're starting over now. And so I just saw such a need for this, and I just feel I'm tuned into it. God wants me to do it. I like to do it. I love helping people. And when you spend 3 decades moving people professionally and personally to a better place, like I said earlier, it's the same conversation, you know?
Do you know that when you start talking like that, that your voice goes up an octave? That
Yeah,
your
I
voice
get
shows your excitement.
Yeah, it's authentic. I am very enthusiastic about it because I just see I've always loved serving people. It almost feels selfish when you see how much you can help someone, then and you see their reaction. It's like it makes me feel humility. Like just keep doing it. So I appreciate that observation. I have heard my energy level goes up when
It does.
yeah.
I'm glad it does. And I know we wanted to talk about executive presence under pressure because
Mhm.
you work with a lot of executive C-suites. I mean, you're working with people who are already under enormous pressure.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question is going to be, how can a leader maintain executive presence when their private life is collapsing? What are the
Yeah.
non-negotiables? What should they delegate versus personally own? When should they talk and when should they not talk?
Yeah, it's a great question and it's a multifaceted answer. We've already addressed a couple of them. I would fall right into a routine of exercise and breath work and better nutrition and those they sound so simple, but most people when they decide they want to change something significant, they take on too much too soon. So it's baby steps, but I would start with exercise, breath, breathing and movement. You can't do this without those things. And some guys are going to be doing that for the first time in their lives. The other thing that, and this is what my podcast is all about with my buddy Jim, the Imperfect Men's Club, and that is life has got about 5 areas that need your love and attention consistently, and in no particular order. They're the way that you view money and the responsibility of your financial circumstances, your well-being, so your mental and physical health, your relationships with other people, your view of the world, spirituality, politics, how you show up in the world, and then the last one is your profession, which is at our age maybe your life's work. And from this moment on, when I begin a coaching session with someone, I'm going to insist that you spend a moment, that could be 5 seconds, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 5 hours, that's up to you, attending to all five of those areas, at least by thinking about them and asking the question, does that area of my life need more attention today or more love today? And that could be the extent of it. Because what guys do is they go all into work, right? And they get fat and they lose their friendships and everything else. And then the finances become an issue and everything else spirals because most of us, in my experience, don't do what I just said. We grab one of them, we grab two of them, and we neglect the other three. Most people neglect four and just go all in on one. So that would be those would be the first two steps. And I think, without those two steps, you're just making everything else more difficult.
That makes sense, and that leads me to gratitude. I mean, even when you're going through the seven circles of hell, I don't know how many circles there are, but
Yeah.
shouldn't you really concentrate on what worked today, what I'm grateful for?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very, very good there's a couple of phrases that because I can joke about all this stuff now, and I usually I try to joke about most things, and unless it's just completely inappropriate at a particular time. But I think that gratitude is it's one of the words I write in my journal at least once, usually more than once, every single day, because in the middle of the darkness for me, it was still, I could look to my left or my right or open up a newspaper or turn on the television, and I could see a lot of people that had it way worse off than I did. And so there's a saying, I can't attribute it because I don't remember who I heard it first, but there's a story about a wise person sitting in the middle of a circle of 10 people, 12 people sitting around, and he presents an empty burlap bag to the group, and he said, I want everybody to throw all your troubles in the bag. And so everybody figuratively throws all their troubles in the bag. And now he goes back to around the circle and says something to the effect of, now you got two choices. You can reach into the bag and grab whatever surfaces, or you can have your own troubles back. And everybody said, I'll take my own troubles. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you don't know what else everybody's got
Oh,
going
no,
on.
no. Oh,
So,
no. What's behind door number two? No, thank you.
yeah, no, I'll just keep my own and I'll work on them, I promise.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we talk about a lot about, founders and C-suite leaders, and I've been wanting to ask you this: how do they communicate the change? They're going through again those seven circles of hell.
Yeah.
How do they communicate change to their boards, their investors, or co-founders without weakening trust or having people going, "Oh, you need a doctor." How
Well,
do you do that?
I think one of the things is that you have to not share too much with too many people.
The
And
ugly stuff, you don't want to talk
yeah,
about that.
easier said than done. You probably need at least one confidant, which I was very fortunate. I had a couple. My family was very supportive, and one of my two business partners was very supportive, and that's all I needed. And he was not the non-family member was just a guy that I trusted him with my children. I trusted him implicitly. I trust him today. He's one of my favorite people on the face of the earth. So I went all in with him, and he welcomed the opportunity to help, which is pretty unique. But I would say, I found myself sitting in the car in the parking lot for a few more minutes just to compose myself. Maybe I had just been crying or I had a scratch on my face because she swiped something at me. There were times when you gotta pull up your boots by the laces, and you just gotta put your face on. And so I would highly suggest, don't make this public knowledge. I mean, people are gonna know, people are gonna talk, but if you start wearing your emotions on your sleeve, you're gonna be in trouble pretty quick. So that's why I think these other things that we've talked about are so helpful, because breath work, it works.
It
Meditation works.
does.
Yeah,
It does.
yeah,
I've
it
got one of
works.
those. It's I'm trying to remember the name of it because it's a little whistle that I use for breath work.
Hmm.
And I'll have it's hanging in my bathroom. I'll go get it because most of the time it's around my neck, but it works. It basically changes what do you call it? It's a sound. It's a sound that changes what you're thinking, how you're thinking it, and it
Yeah,
does work. It's a
yeah,
little whistle.
yeah,
I'll send you a note to it because you might like it. But
yeah.
it's yeah, breath work is important, movement is important. And listen, I'm a solopreneur. I do everything all by myself,
Me too.
which I'm an introvert. I have to be by myself. I can be around people, truly I can. For 59 and three-quarter minutes. After that, I got to go home. My battery is drained. And people say, well, you don't sound like an introvert. Well, I don't have any filters. That's why. But
Yeah,
I do
yeah,
need to be left alone. But I also had to be very careful when I, permanently and deliberately became alone to not just sit in front of my monitor all the time because
yeah,
I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd. I like to build. I like to break things and, I like to, ooh, how does that work? And I started putting on a little bit of weight and my back hurt all the time. Oh, what are you doing to yourself? And I had to go, okay, concentrate on how you feel, how you're moving, what you're doing. Creativity came back. It was a miracle.
yeah, yeah. No, it's everything that I've ever accomplished that you could call worthwhile. It was hard, and I did it with small incremental steps consistently executed over long periods of time. I
Oh,
don't
say that
think
again. Say that again. It's
so.
important.
Everything that I've ever accomplished that I could consider worthwhile, I've accomplished by small incremental steps consistently executed over long periods of time. And I have not seen another formula. You know, the world shows us the winning champion of the game, but they don't show us the 10 years in the gym that preceded that, you know. So we miss this one quite often. And we have senses of entitlement and shortcuts and whatever you want to call them, shiny objects, whatever. There's not another formula, not in my experience.
Right. And you were talking about that, and I wrote down micro habits and daily routines. So I knew that we had already talked about that.
Yeah.
How should a leader structure their calendar during recovery? And that's a good way to put it, recovery, to avoid bad decisions while still maintaining momentum. And I know you've got your daily and your weekly structure. Do you want to kind of, tack on that, or have we covered it already?
No, I think I would add it is a bit redundant, I suppose, but I think it's the emphasis is important, and I think that we what I see with guys, middle-aged guys, just to throw everybody into a big bucket. Um, we throw away our mornings and we throw away our evenings, right? And so when I've had discussions with friends of mine who have asked for my assistance, because I'm still pretty fit, I had a breakfast with a guy yesterday. He goes, "How old are you?" I said, 64. He goes, "Oh my gosh, you don't look 64 at all." I said, "Well, thank you." So it's a state of mind, but I go, friends will say to me, "I don't have time. I don't have time." I'm like,
Turn off the
that's
TV now.
just yeah, wake up 15 minutes earlier, you know? I mean, I love being awake when no one else is awake. I love it, right? And, instead of, a couple of cocktails at night or TV before you go to bed, take a book that will improve you in some way and just read it for 15 minutes. It'll put you to sleep too, and then the sleep is such a common knowledgeable. We need our sleep, but none of us sleep well. Not in my experience, but you can impact your sleep by your morning and your evening. And if you can have some productivity in the evening, some productivity in the morning, and a good night's sleep, you're halfway home, you know?
You are, and sleep has never been my strong suit. In fact, I don't like it. I don't enjoy it at all. I'm a
Yeah,
lucid dreamer. I sleep maybe 3 to 4 hours a night, maybe. That's it.
I heard Denise, sorry to cut you off, but I heard about our beloved president that 1% of the population requires no more than an hour or two of sleep, and he's one of
Yeah,
those.
he is. And,
Yeah.
I can't get by on that, but I can sleep 3 or 4 hours and I wake up constantly. I'm up and down. But what I do is, and this is, you're talking about meditation, it's also gratitude. What I do before I know I'm going to actually fall asleep, and it may be 1:30 in the morning, I don't
Mhm.
have any set time. And I will look up at my ceiling fan and I just, I take the iPad off my nose because that's what's telling me I'm sleepy. I'm going to go to sleep now.
Yeah, yeah,
And I will look up at my ceiling fan and out loud, I express my gratitude for the day because somebody's listening.
yeah,
Those,
yeah.
the universe, God, we don't know. My
You know,
cat, who knows?
yeah,
And then I will literally say to my subconscious, I'm giving this to you for review. I couldn't figure out this piece of code. This has got me, bothered. I'm just not sure what to do about this. Mark 3:18, without fail, it delivers. I wake up, I write it down. I may go make gumbo. I may go back to sleep. I don't know, but I have to
yeah.
do that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I would like to comment on that. I think that's a great, the two things that come to mind, and I learned this a few years ago, many years ago now, but during the dark times, I would, sleep was not available to me
No,
very consistently. But one of the things I shifted in my mind was, you know that you can function tomorrow with almost no sleep. So you don't have to go to sleep right now, but you need to lie down and close your eyes and just let what happens.
right,
And
rest.
if you don't worry about being tired tomorrow, then you're more likely to go to sleep. It's the being worried about the cost of not sleeping tomorrow is what keeps you awake. And it sounds simple, but it's magical. So I would share that with everybody to just try. And
Right.
your little routine is a great idea as well. So the sleep thing, it's a big deal. And I'm sorry I lost my train of thought on the second point I was going to make.
No, I get it. And sleeping, my mother used to, because I've done this all my life. This is not new. I have done it since I was old enough to walk talk.
Hmm.
My mother would say, you don't want to sleep because it cuts into your reading time, which is true. And
Yeah.
we were talking about reading. I've been reading since I was 3, mostly because nobody told me I couldn't.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. That's great.
honestly, I'll sleep when I'm ready. And I'll say I'll sleep when I'm dead, which is not really funny, but kind of sort of.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
sleep when my body says, okay, let's rest now. That's it.
yeah,
That's all I need.
yeah. Well, you've taken the worry out of it. So in another way, I remember what I was thinking about. So the subconscious, that's what I was thinking about. And I think that you are correct. This part of throwing away the evening is not setting your subconscious up to do the work while you're sleeping. And if you embed in your subconscious positive thoughts, gratitude, things to do, not too much, but your brain will work on those things while you're sleeping.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've done a significant amount of work on the subconscious, and I believe it to be true scientifically that most of us, if not all of us, 95% of what we do, think, and say is happening in our subconscious. We're not even aware that we're doing it. And I think another area that I can't profess to be an expert in, but I'm pretty well versed in it, is if you can take whatever trauma from whenever in your life and convince your subconscious that that is something that's not happening anymore, that happened then, there's nothing I can do about it. And the only way it's going to have an impact on me is if I let it in. So let's get it out of there. And there's all kinds of techniques, meditation and so on and so forth, that you can do. But I would highly recommend that any man that I talk to, any person that's struggling with anything, get some information on how to manipulate your subconscious because it's an extremely powerful thing to do.
It is. And I have to tell you, and I'm not being braggy about this, I haven't been sick with a cold or the flu in almost 20 years.
I'm in the same boat.
And you know why? Because I refuse to think it's going to happen. My
Yeah.
subconscious knows I'm in charge.
Yeah. Yeah, it's extremely powerful. And I've seen it in action. And when you go back to your question about what did you do to begin your recovery? Well, I did a lot of investigation into that, you know, and the tools are everywhere and the data, all these things we're talking about, we have the data now, we didn't have the data 20 years ago, but we have all the data now, you know.
We do. And my grandmother, bless her, I miss her. She would say, you are what you eat, you
Hmm.
are what you drink, and you are what you think.
That's right.
I've got that written down on my whiteboard. Thank you, Grandma. But
100%. Yeah.
it's true. I mean, I just doesn't occur to me that I'm going to get sick. Listen, honestly, if you get sick in my house, and I rarely have people here, but if somebody is here, I'll say, listen, if you're going to be ill, you're going to get apple cider vinegar, unbuffered aspirin, and I'm not sharing my Benadryl with you because I'm allergic to wasp. But that's it. That's all you. Oh, and I'll share my Tums with you. That's it. That's all you're going to get. You're going
That's
to have to take yourself to the clinic.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, you're a hornet. Did you say wasps or hornet? You said, yeah, I am too.
All of them,
I
wasps,
blow up
hornets,
like
bees. Oh,
I
yeah.
yeah, I blow up like a balloon when I get stung by a wasp.
Oh, I got stung by a what do you call those horseflies? I thought my leg was going to need to be amputated. It
I
was
went in
awful.
I went into the CVS pharmacy after getting stung by a wasp in my face, and I couldn't find the Benadryl. I went back to the pharmacist and I looked at him and I said, "Where's your Benadryl?" And he looked at me and he sh with shock on his face and he goes, "You need to go to the hospital." I'm
Oh,
like, but it's funny. I'm thinking about it now. I'm a guy. I don't go to the hospital. I don't ask for directions. I don't do any of that stuff. We don't do that, you know.
yeah. But if you don't get that Benadryl on board within 5 minutes, you're going to the hospital because you're going
Yeah,
to go into
yeah,
shock.
yeah.
You'll
It's
have
horrible.
anaphylactic shock going on.
Yeah.
But listen, for listeners who cannot hire a coach immediately, and we are running out of time, and I hate that. What accountability structures can they set up themselves? Just kind of recap what we've been talking about.
Yeah, I think that, to your point in the pregame about perplexity, find a place that you can go do some research on and get into these routines that I've talked about. There's a sleep routine, there's a meditation routine, there's a journaling routine, there's an exercise routine, and don't take on too much. If there's four things that I just said, don't do them all at the same time. You know, do them
No,
one at a
make one
time.
habit and then move to the next one.
It's pretty well documented that habits take around 21 to 28 days. So I tell people just do the one thing for 30 days. The other thing is have no expectation of any noticeable progress because these things happen under the covers, right? One day you're going to wake up if you do these things and whatever was struggling for you, it'll be a little bit better. And you just wait. Don't give up. Don't expect, like, if it's the gym, don't look in the mirror. Don't step on the scale. These things don't happen quickly. They happen with small, like I said, incremental change over time. But I would focus on sleep routine. I would focus on exercise routine and the inner work thing where all those other things are kind of bundled up, the prayer, the meditation, the journaling, whatever. And to your point about being an introvert, you got to get out and hug somebody. You got to get out and shake a hand. You got to connection with humans is critical for all of us. Some of us need a lot more than others. You probably don't need much, but you got to have a little. So I could go on and on and on about steps, but I think to support my own position, that's enough for somebody to get started.
Got it. And I'm trying to I think it's called the Love Tuner. I'm going to make sure that's what I'm talking about. LUV Tuner. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure that's it, but I'll send you a link. Where can people find you, Mark? Where do you want them to connect with you? And tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, so markaylward.com, I own the domain, and you can get to all of my other things from there. But some people might be better served going to my LinkedIn profile, and it's / Aylward Mark. And so, if you'd be so kind to put those in the show notes, that would be wonderful. But it's my name, and my name is pretty unique. And when I put it in to Google or whatever, my LinkedIn profile comes up number one because I've been on there for a long time, and I write a lot of stuff. Everything that we've just talked about, you can get access to supporting copy, supporting content, either video or written word about everything I just talked about for free, right? So you can navigate around my online world to determine whether you want to reach out to me, which I would highly recommend. And there's two steps, right? There's the my framework is called the R.E.A.L framework: reflect, evaluate, activate, and lead. It's a four-step process. It's very simple. TheRealAssessment.com is an online assessment that I built, and those results will come to me, and I'll return contact in 48 hours. That would tell me whether you're ready to talk. And then the next step is a 30-minute conversation. None of that costs money because I want to be involved in the determination process pretty aggressively as to who I'm going to coach and who I'm not. Because I only want to help people that are ready, and I know what ready means. Trust me.
You and me both. I honestly turn away more people than I accept if we're not a good fit or I really feel that I cannot do for you what you need for me to do. I'll refer you somewhere else or just
I,
say no.
yeah, yeah.
That
I
doesn't serve anybody any good if you
no.
just say, sure, I can help you.
My daughter, I talked to her yesterday, and she said I got two customers now that they just can't stop asking questions. They think we're available 24/7. I said, get rid of them, get rid of them. And so it's hard to do, but getting rid of a customer that's giving you a hard time or getting rid of a customer you can't help is one of the most important decisions that you can make as a business owner, I think.
And you have to make them quickly
You
before
do.
everybody gets dragged down.
That's right.
And now
That's
you've
right.
got ill will. And, these days we have keyboards.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
get to that point. Just say thank you, good luck, and
Mhm.
bow out.
Yeah, it was like firing people when I had employees. It was the worst thing to do, but I never took anybody's dignity when I did it. I said, I'm doing things the way I do things. It's not the only way to do things, but we're oil and water here, and I think it'd be best for you and it'd be best for me if you found another place where it was more compatible with the way that you look at the world. And that's not a criticism, it's just an observation. So, and yeah, you can't do that quick enough because as soon as you think you should is when you should, and we don't. We hang on because we're We're not bad people. We're just
Yeah.
bad to ourselves. But the podcast is, as I said earlier, we've been in it for 5 years or so. We took a little hiatus in there at the beginning because I started with my daughter as a designer and editor because that's what she does. She's a film school graduate and very competent. But then she got busy because people were throwing money at her to become customers to do other things. And she said, Dad, I don't have the time to do it anymore. Put those 5 episodes up and see what you can do. And Jim and I said almost a year later, because we didn't want to stop doing it. We loved it. I said, let's do this. Let's just shoot for 30 minutes. Let's just the Zoom thing, you send the Zoom transcript and the Zoom audio to me. I'll put it in iMovie and I'll snip the beginning and I'll snip the end. And then I'll take the transcript and create show notes with AI. And no music, no editing. We got good microphones. We have a lot of fun. And so, we got about 140 episodes out there. And the audience that my coaching is for is a subset of the audience for the podcast. So the audience for the podcast is a broader audience. It is men centric, but I know a lot of women that would love to be able to help their man with advice or a link or a connection or honey, maybe you should listen to these guys for a sec. They're kind of funny. They're kind of raw. They're kind of wise. And we're starting the process of monetizing that shortly and building out a new website. But yeah, the Imperfect Men's Club, and it's on every platform that I can think of. So I would love people to go there, and if it resonates, leave a review, leave us a couple stars because that gets it out to more people. But yeah, you can ask any questions about that you want, or that maybe that'll suffice.
Excellent. Well, listen, everybody. Today, Mark Aylward taught us how C-suite leaders and founders and men in general can start reclaiming leadership after divorce, stabilize their roles, communicate clearly to key stakeholders, and take care of themselves. Rebuild focus with simple daily routines. So connect with him. Go to his website. He gave you what was it, Mark?
Mark
Tell me one more
Aylward.
time.
Yep. It's
Yep. Dot
M-A-R-K.
com.
Yeah. AYLWARD.com.
Got it. Well, Mark, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. You ought to see my notes. I was taking notes like crazy.
Well, you feel free to snap a picture and send me some. I could use a good laugh.
I'm
So
not sure I can read some of them. Yeah,
thank
I
you,
was
Denise.
scribbling.
It
Listen,
was
it's
a
my pleasure.
yeah, mine as well. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Listen, everybody, if this episode helped you, subscribe and share it with a leader who needs it. I am Denise Griffitts, and thank you for listening, and I will see you each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.